I'd like to welcome you to Unit 4, our last unit of this HP Catalyst Academy mini course on thinking like an engineer. Unit 4 is what I call a design review. After having looked at problems, looked at their solutions, looked at various ways of interconnecting STEM disciplines, looked at STEMX, and also having looked at various ways in which habits of mind come into play, we now start to put all that together to review and take a look at what it is we created and how useful it may be somewhere down the line. Very important aspect of what we do. Again, a design review. There's no reading assignment for this week, so please feel free to review any past reading assignments, and just as importantly, take a closer look at our thinking maps, take a closer look at our framework for 21st century learning and the skills involved and other aspects of the course where we pointed you in certain directions to hopefully get you energized and also just incentivize you to pull different kinds of ideas from different places into your work. So for a design review, we're going to review 3 more habits of mind. Very important. So take a moment right now to kind of think about these and how they impact your design. The first one is systems thinking. Systems thinking is another way of saying the big picture. How do we look at the overall, overarching kinds of ideas that involve what we're doing? In K-12 engineering education, what is the big picture? What is the systems thinking approach to what it is we're trying to achieve? Well, if we're looking at STEM, engineering is probably one of the least familiar of all the STEM disciplines. So the big picture is, how do we introduce something that is not very familiar, if you will, to our students, to ourselves and our colleagues in a manner that would actually facilitate teaching and learning and moving things together in this environment. Science and mathematics are pillars of our educational system. They've been with us for a while, they've been researched heavily, and are always it's part of curriculum all the way across the board. Technology is somewhat more recent. Yes, in the old days, technologies used to be film strip machines and projectors and the like, but now technology is smart boards and iPads and other kinds of tablet devices and things that we've used in our classrooms and are using in our classroom, including the web, that actually change very much how teaching and learning transpires. But engineering, what's engineering? What is that? How have we been exposed to it? What is that picture? So that's one of the reasons for this course. One of the reasons for this course is to really take a deeper look at how engineers think, and to some degree to what aspects of that thinking could you grab onto, use, and integrate into your work. That's the big systems thinking picture of STEM, if you will, from the perspective of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So think of it as a storyline. Think of it as a kind of a theme. And in particular, dig a little bit deeper and think of it as storytelling. What is the story of integrating engineering into K-12 education? What is the story of you and what it is you choose in terms of a portfolio or a proposal or a plan? What is that story around what it is you're trying to achieve for your own K-12 engineering education purposes? It's also a great way to integrate with language arts, because telling stories and creating narratives around situations is such an important skill. And we all have stories, and we all need to create ways to tell them and to tell them in an appropriate manner. So there's opportunities to connect across the curriculum and take a look at this idea of storytelling. So systems thinking, if you will, can be a kind of storytelling that can be useful in other dimensions. 2, communications. How do we talk about engineering? How do we talk about our work? Recently, there's a field that is emerging called the science of science communication. And it's a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary field, a variety of different individuals, journalists, anthropologists, scientists, mathematicians, and many, many others coming together to talk about how we communicate science. How do citizens know more about science? How do individuals in classrooms and people under certain kinds of learning constraints learn more about science? A burgeoning area, again, sufficiently complex, so it requires the integration of different kinds of fields, disciplines, and ideas to make certain kinds of things like this happen. So, in terms of communications and pertaining to K-12 engineering, we want to be aware of the messaging that engineering is having. What messages are we sending about engineers? So what messages are we sending about engineering? So step back for a moment and take a look at your design. Think about it for a moment and how it starts to communicate your intentions. How it starts to communicate the benefits of engineering, how it starts to communicate how engineers think, and how that might integrate with not only the other STEM disciplines, but across the curriculum, and figure out ways to understand that messaging, be very clear about it, be very intentional about the messaging, so that your students, your colleagues, and you continue to get and generate ideas and understand the purposes behind engineering and its integration in the K-12 curriculum. Lastly is ethics. The ethics is very, very important in engineering because it really impacts our decisions, especially around those families of solutions we've talked about before. And it's a wonderful opportunity to start to introduce into the curriculum the idea of what it means to make these ethical choices and decisions, ethical considerations. Ethics are very often determined by the constraints of the problem. So these various constraints impact choices we make and their pros and cons. There's good and bad, right or wrong, other kind of things that come into play. And ethics gives us a framework for looking at that. What a wonderful lesson that engineering can provide for our students is to take a look at their designs, take a look at their creativity, take a look at their intentionality, if you will, and try to make sense of that from the standpoint of ethical concerns. It can breed a lot of different kinds of group work. It can cause them to interact with people in communities and families. It's just an opportunity for them to take a look at their own compass, if you will, and try to get a sense of where it comes into design and how they would make decisions going forward. So 3 more habits of mine: ethics, communication, and systems thinking is part of the last bit of our toolbox, if you will, on engineering habits of mind. Okay, so now you've taken a look at some of these ideas and you're ready to do what's called launch or roll out your design. Rollout is a term borrowed from the aerospace industry, where you build planes and you roll them out of the hangar and took pictures of them, and you you created test flights for them. So the rollout of your particular design is next. This course does not deal with the rollout of your design, does not deal with testing, but I think it behooves us to take a look at what it means to test your design and for you to have some sense of what that testing really is. And certainly there are other kinds of dimensions of it, but again, how will people perceive your portfolio, or how useful is your portfolio to you? Your proposal, will it get funded, or will it actually lead to change in an environment? Will it really reflect accurately your advocacy on engineering, your advocacy on teaching, and the notion of K-12 STEM? How does that really reflect what you're trying to achieve? Your lesson plan, how do you roll it out? You roll it out by teaching it. You roll it out by testing it in front of colleagues. How do you think your students will actually look at your lesson? How do you think they'll accept it? How do you think they'll gravitate towards the activities? What kind of attention will they pay to it? How will the 5 E's, if you remember, the engage and explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate, how will they impact, or how will be impacted, if you will, by this whole idea of launch? And what is it that you've planned to do, and how will it turn out? And you got to admit that sometimes when you create your designs, they don't always work the way you think. Those of us who are K-12 teachers know that, and we understand that we try different things. They don't work always the way we think, but we try them anyway. We try them because they're informed by our best practice, informed by our best thinking, informed by new ideas, and making things happen in new and unique ways. So, testing is one thing, measurement is something else. It's a much harder problem, something we need to consider, but something so important in this era of teacher evaluation as to what it is we're trying to do in our classrooms and in our learning situations. So as you certainly already know, that the quantitative methods are inferential and the qualitative methods are interpretive, but we need to at least have a understanding, if not a working understanding of these ideas, something to say, some perspective, some voice on these and how they interact and impact what it is we're trying to achieve in the classroom, if we intend to roll out anything new, if we intend to roll out something different as K-12 engineering is in our environments, because we do not have a lot of opportunities, have not had a lot of opportunities to roll out engineering in this way. And that idea of something new, that's innovation at its core. So, one way to look at what we're doing in terms of K-12 engineering education is we're actually working on an innovation. We're working on a way to diffuse an innovation into some population or environment. There are many stages of innovation, more than we could get an opportunity to actually address in the context of this course. But 1, 2, 3 of them, or 4 of them I'd like to focus you on right now are the first 4. Need, awareness, interest, and trial. There has to be a need for the innovation. People have to see the need for that. Cell phones, for example, mobile telephones, there's a need for that, at least. A need that has been parlayed, a need that has been projected, and now market penetration of cell phones is certainly huge. Also, there's an awareness. Not only do you have to have a need for an innovation, you have to know that it's there. You have to know that it's available. It's useful, possibly even affordable. How do you do that? Innovators, true innovators, have the socioeconomics so that affordability is less of an issue. The rest of us, which in the literature is called the early adopters, and possibly even the early majority, for us, price is more of an issue. Not only am I aware of it, do I need it, can I afford it? And so now, if I can afford it, then I might actually generate the next stage, which is interest. I'm interested in it because not only do I think I need it and I'm aware of it, but I can afford it, so I can now see myself having this innovation. And then once I try it, and once I take it, if you will, I want to actually try the innovation out. I want, okay, so I can afford it, I see the need for it, I have an awareness of it, bang, let me just see if I can do that. So that's an important aspect of what we want to look at in our own designs. Is there a need for our design? Is there an awareness of it? How have we communicated it? Also, is there a way that we can actually think about any interest in it? How have we branded it and marketed it to people or shared it in a manner that will cause them to want to try it? How have we done that with ourselves to make sure that we also want to try our own innovations? Innovation here is the key. And I'm touching on these topics even so slightly because it's really important to take part of your thinking and focus it on innovation and realize that engineering in a K-12 environment is indeed innovative. So how will you be an innovator? What kind of social economics, what kind of personality behaviors and communication behaviors will you adopt that will actually cause your design to be as useful in your classroom or learning environment as you hoped it would be? So innovation is important. And hoped it would be useful for whom is another question, and those are your clients. So if you look at education as a service-oriented endeavor, professional endeavor, and your clients are learners, but sometimes your clients and your beneficiaries are a larger group than that. They're your stakeholders. So imagine, if you will, with your design, how your stakeholders see your design. In other words, students as learners, teachers as educators, administrators as reviewers, you name it. Various roles you attach to individuals who take a look at the work that you're doing and see if they can see themselves as innovators in that way. Do they see a need for what you're doing? Do they have an awareness of what's going on? Will they adopt that innovation after they've given it a try? In other words, when you've actually introduced engineering into a classroom situation or into a lesson, will your students gravitate towards that, see that, grab hold of the ideas, and you can now refer back to those ideas in future lessons, future units, and other kinds of situations. And will colleagues look at your work and look at the student progress and say, hey, I'd like to try that myself. So, in launch or rollout of your design, thinking about your clients, thinking about innovation, thinking about testing, and possibly, if is at all possible, looking at measurement, are aspects of taking your design and making it really useful along the way, and getting that whole idea out there. Now, what I'd like to do right now is to point you to a really interesting idea called soft systems methodology. It's been a research-tested idea that's been around for more than 40 years. And its original intent was to be used for a IT environment. We talked about that when we looked at the framework for 21st century skills, this idea around ITC literacy, if you will. Creating information systems has always been what's called a hard science. One that was highly quantitative, methodological to build systems. This research suggests that various systems of complexity, even those that involve technology as we understand it, have a quote-unquote soft component. In other words, there's a human component in their interaction, understanding, being part of the design, and making meaning, if you will, of what's happening with them. And soft systems methodology gives you some nice language, I think, and some interesting ways to kind of approach the work that you're doing in terms of design. So even though you might not be designing an information system per se or in a strict sense, you are designing an artifact that's innovative, that should be going into an environment and be useful for a variety of different people for whom that you're designing it for. So, a brief look at soft systems methodology. It's an action research methodology. And there's a tug of war here, if you will. One is that the work can actually produce more action. The work sometimes can produce more research. And often the individuals involved are split among the fact that they look at action or they look at research, not enough action, not enough research. So there's a struggle, if you will, in introducing this idea. But that's systems thinking. Systems thinking is taking into account all voices, all considerations, making decisions, and at the very heart, though, of this process is making sure that people are involved, that their voices are heard, that they're registered and recognized, and they're all part of the design process. It is what I've heard called participatory learning at its best in some respects. There are several components to it, and let me just outline and briefly introduce you to them so that you can get a sense of how they may be useful as you just roll out your design and kind of tie them, cross the T's and dot the I's of your final design, if you will, and for your submission. One, your individuals and groups involved, we talked about that before, your stakeholders. Who are they? What do they mean to you? What does your design mean to them? They are the core. It's what they see and believe that matters. Now they look through a filter, and that filter gives them a sense of what their perceived worlds are. Even though they're individuals and groups, they see the world differently. So through their various filters, they see that world in various ways. You, as a designer, could be wise by looking at and understanding and providing a space for your learners, for those individuals and groups, for those involved in your design, to actually express what they see through their filters and what that perceived world looks like, feels like, tastes like, smells like to them. And from those perceived worlds, you can now start to generate a dialogue, some type of discourse, so that we can start to come together on what we see, come together on our various beliefs, and kind of converge upon something that really works in a systems thinking way, taking the broad views of everybody, the things that they have in their minds and their expectations and hopes, and bring that together in an organized and principled way. From this discourse, they will share and meetings will be created, individual meetings from various stakeholders, individuals and groups involved. Also, collective shared meetings that will come out of this particular process. So maintaining this path of discourse, creating ways to discuss and move things about, and moving to get these shared meetings and creating meetings among them. And from those shared meetings, you start to build structures. Structures that allow the designer, you, the engineer, also the clients, others who may use what you're creating, to come together and assemble their various ways of understanding, come to agreement and accommodation among themselves, pros and cons, ebb and flow, yin yang, putting it all together in a manner that can cause the whole group of individuals to move forward, and you, the designer, being much aware of that and seeing how all of that might just indeed work. So those assemblies and structures are built, and from that comes purposeful action. Things that really happen in the real world, change that really occurs, lessons taught, advocates that have been brought about and converted, if you will, and change as in funding or the institutionalization of various kinds of structures, processes, courses, you name it, curricula. That's what we're trying to achieve here, and that's what we're trying to promote in terms of K-12 engineering as something that is an innovation that diffuses into K-12 environments. So those several things, individuals and groups, perceived worlds, discourse, created meaning, structures or assemblies of those meanings, and purposeful action is part of a soft systems methodology that I recommend you take a look at and see whether or not even some of the pieces, if you will, of it, some of those segments, if you will, might be useful going forward. Again, an action research method that may yield a little bit more action, a little bit more research, if you will, but certainly will allow a perspective or generate a perspective by you of how your K-12 engineering artifact or design can move into the environment that you designed it for. So, on that note, this is Unit 4, and I want to recap just a moment on the various ideas in the units. A lot of ideas floated around, understood, but there's some core ideas I'd like to leave you with before we part. And there are 6 or 7 ideas I wanted to try to promote to kind of rehash what we're looking at, what we're seeing, and what might be useful to you going forward. 1, we looked at what it means to actually look at a problem and find the right problem, if you will, and sometimes change that problem so we get it right. 2, solutions, families of solutions, more than one, especially in engineering. So how do we choose among those solutions? How do we now start to generate them all? What kind of constraints and other kinds of ideas do we bring into play to make those solutions more viable? Engineering design. You recall that engineering design has several different pieces to it, one of which is optimism and other kinds of things of that sort. And it's important for systems thinking, optimism, and other things to come into bear here. So engineering design is this process that engineers use to kind of make sense of their world. And you'll notice that if we say that engineering is design under constraint, that indeed it's something that we've all done in various ways. Engineers do it all the time. We do it with math and science somewhere nearby, because very often to take nature and the natural world and the science to use it to create artifacts and to solve problems requires mathematics and science in many cases. STEMX, don't forget STEMX. It's not just STEM, but STEM and arts, skills, and disciplines and other things that help us operationalize STEMX. STEMX is important. It's one of the reasons why the HP Catalyst Academy is very focused on making sure the STEMX ideas get out there and creating a plethora of mini courses, hopefully that will help you negotiate and manage the STEMX ideas in your classrooms or learning environments. Engineering habits of mind, things to think about, ways to look at the world, things to consider. And don't forget, those habits of mind, you notice, cross over even the 21st century skills. And of course, you'll find that they cross over other areas as well. So look for them. Look for the engineering habits of mind and things that you see and do, so that now you can make connections to engineering even more frequently than you have in the past. Don't forget innovation, because what you're doing is innovative. And you are innovators. If you're thinking about K-12 engineering, you're automatically innovators. You're taking this course, you're looking at engineering, you're innovators. So innovators have certain kinds of, again, social economic behaviors, personality behaviors, and communication behaviors that help actually innovations diffuse into their environment. And lastly, action research. Think always about evidence and data. Think about what you can do, even slightly, in student work, your own voice and view in your work to pull that all together. And that, my friends, is engineering. That is a good sense of engineering. It is not engineering from the math and science perspective, as you all know it per se, but this is engineering from the thinking perspective. And we think that engineering from the thinking perspective is what teachers, educators, students, learners can use and need in moving K-12 engineering into their daily lives, into their thinking and learning, and even more so into the curriculums in our schools. We see that K-12 engineering is indeed where we are right now. I thank you for your attention. Appreciate having you around. This is Unit 4. Please feel free to come back, review all the videos, take a look at that, and let us know what you think. And we certainly appreciate having you with us. And take care.